So welcome to this panel discussion on the road ahead. I am very fortunate to be joined by three gentlemen who are considered thought leaders and experts in their respective fields. Of course, we've got the chairman of the NADA and chairman of Pohanka Auto Group, Geoff Pohanka. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
We also have Chase Fraser from FMC. Chase, thank you so much for joining.
Of course.
And Ron from RL Fry, leading advisor and strategist in retail automotive. And Ron, thank you as well for taking the time to join this really important discussion.
Good to be here, David. Thanks for arranging this.
So thank you. So Geoff, I want to start with you, if it's okay. And the thought, occurred to me. I ask this of every dealer I see, every dealer client I have. What keeps you up at night heading into 2024? When you look at headlines and articles that relate to retail automotive, by far the greatest number has to do with EVs. And I'm curious what your take is as we move forward on EVs. What's going to be the implications of some of the existing rules and regulations, and also what is likely to happen in the upcoming meetings with the EPA, and how will that impact stores going forward in 2024?
Well, it's the transition to electrification is a complicated subject, but everyone's getting a taste of it right now. Clearly, the manufacturers wanted to emulate the success of the early direct sellers, particularly the primary one, and we know who they are. And as they get into it, they're getting a taste for what it's all about. Charles Lindbergh was first to fly solo across the Atlantic. Who was second? Well, we don't know. So, and they have Elon, who's really the modern P.T. Barnum, which other manufacturers don't have an equivalent. I think we're seeing some impact already from legislation. California states with Stellantis, in California and the California following states, Stellantis no longer has in Dodge, Chrysler, or Jeep gasoline-only vehicles unless they're special ordered individually by the consumer. They have to be plug-in hybrids, which is 1.8% of national sales last year. And Ram, I think, is just V6. So that's a major handicap. What you're going to see from the federal government, and probably in March, is new CAFE requirements. They want 58 miles per gallon, fleet average. No gas car gets 58 miles per gallon. The highest is 57. And so they want the average to be 58. Now, there's a formula which, it's not quite 58. It's less than that. But the only way to reach those numbers is that for 67% of all retail sales be electric, fully electric by 2032. And basically, the market's not at that level. The retail sales of pure electric vehicles is about 7% retail. If you take out about 10% of electric car sales are to fleets. It's about 7%. The leading direct seller, which I mentioned, is about 60% of the 7. So 2 to 3% of OEM retail sales are electric, and dealers have a 114-day supply. So we're getting a taste for what the true market is. Tesla, I own a Tesla. I bought one. I want to know what the buzz was about. I've got 2 EVs in my driveway. I'm not opposed. Dealers need to have affordable, desirable EVs. We got to compete with direct sellers. But the market's not going to be 67%. It'll be something less. And to that, and I think there's a crunch time coming. And of course, the manufacturers are facing 3 things. They're facing China, which is promoting electric car sales in China and trying to push out the foreign-based manufacturers out of China. Europe is going to ban the sale of gasoline cars in 2035. And of course, the Biden administration will have something like that by 2032, 67%. So the manufacturers are looking at one hand to emulate the success of the direct sellers. They want to have that. And they also are looking at the government regulations. But we're seeing consumer demand is not anywhere near that level, particularly when it gets down to that's my only car, the regular person. And something's going to happen here.
Geoff, so much to unpack there, and thank you for sharing that. A couple thoughts jump to mind. You look at the Model Y and the Model 3 outsell every other EV model combined currently. Second thought is we already seem to be experiencing some sagging demand I won't say it's a saturation point, but certainly sagging demand, and we expect to see EV models double over the next couple of years. Third, you mentioned China, BYD and company coming stateside, of course, VinFast, and they are choosing to go through a dealer network rather than a direct model like some of the others out there. Do these collectively pose a problem, growing problem for the traditional OEMs in terms of their EV models as they come to market?
Well, I think we've seen the early adopters have already adopted, and there's no one following their place. Tesla's lowered the price 6 times. Why? Because they're running out of orders. And there's a person named Troy Teslike that follows Tesla very closely, and he publishes their unsold order bank, and it's very narrow. I mean, it's like a week in the United States. So they're barely keeping their head above water, even Tesla, which is the leader, and they're running out of orders. I bought one. I'm getting, offers. Refer someone, you get free charging, you get this. They want to come to the Washington Auto Show. We're going to let them in our auto show because they're becoming more like a tradition because they're running out of orders. What's that mean for the leader to be running out of orders? It has meaning. And I think with Fisker and VinFast, who are going to go follow the direct sales model, it wasn't working. So they have to go through dealers because, for one, they can't have all those cars on their balance sheet. It's great to have a product that you sell immediately once you make it. The traditional OEMs, when they sell a car, they sell it to us. We own it. They get paid immediately. That's a hell of a process. And I got to sell every car on my lot. I can't go out and find a 57 Chevrolet on my lot. I've sold every car I've ever gotten. So I know they get it on my lot. I'll find a way to sell it by hook or crook, 6,000, whatever. But I think we're finding that the consumer demand is a lot less than the government has planned. And any manufacturer who's got, the early adopters adopt, it's great. It's just what happens after that. We see a slowdown invariably. And I'm not against EVs. They're great in a lot of ways, but the consumer is pretty smart and they'll find what meets their needs best.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In most scenarios in business, ultimately, it is the customer that decides the direction. And here, it kind of feels like the government is trying to take the approach that they're going to decide for the customer. I've just never seen that work out very well. Hey, Chase, I want to jump over to you. I've seen a phenomenon that seems to be growing in scale, and that is that, for years, dealers have been buying third-party solutions out there that solve real problems, solve real friction points within the dealership, and allow them to be able to do a better job of working with their clients. Now it seems like dealers have a very heightened interest in, there's some dealers out there that are creating solutions. There's many dealers that want to get involved in some way and get engaged in the technology and the innovation that's going to occur going forward. And there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm for becoming LPs in your fund and maybe even making direct investments. What do you think is driving that? And is it likely to continue?
Yeah, this is maybe a contrarian answer to your question, but dealers are phenomenal entrepreneurs. And they watched for years as Dealer Track and Dealer Socket and all these businesses just grew, and largely grew because of folks like Pohanka, who had them in all of their stores. So I think a lot of the progressive dealers looked at that and said, hang on, I just grew their business and they just sold to Reynolds or CDK or Cox. I'd like to have a little bit of that as well. And so our estimate, there's probably about 200 dealers right now that are active investors in the technology space. And that's very much a swag number, but it's in the ballpark. 35 of those 200 are investors in our fund. But I think they look at it and they want to be part of the solution. The other component to this is it's really nice when you have a dealer investor because they can test products and they can give feedback to these companies much quicker than if they actually didn't have a skin in the game. So I find in our cases, it's really nice to be able to take, as changes happen with the technology, to go to our LP base and say, hey, what do you think about this? Is this working? Is it not working? It's just quicker iteration.
And it seems like I would think that because it's almost a, I mean, it not almost like it is a true lab environment, right? Where you're actually having the benefit of having your product in that dealership environment. And by virtue of getting that type of feedback, I would think you're far more likely to have a product that has long-term viability and maybe one day finds themselves reaching out to somebody like Ron and saying, what do I do next? Is that fair, Chase?
Yeah, dealers aren't shy, and they're quickly going to say this works or it doesn't work. But that's great. That's really great for me as an investor, and it's really, really great for the dealer, and it's really great for the entrepreneur.
Ron, speaking of that, big difference between, it's one thing to create great innovation, great technology, but you also have to have the business side of the business down, right? I mean, there's no shortage of great products that come out of Silicon Valley, other areas that they seem incredibly viable. They just don't seem to be able to translate getting into the market, or perhaps they get initial success and then they hit some kind of plateau and they don't have the ability to scale up, grow the business, and continue moving it towards being a highly profitable, sustainable business. What would you say to those that are creating innovation today? You know, you've been involved, I believe, with more high impact deals, transactions than any strategist out there. Of course, you had your experience with CDK managing that. You had your experience as the strategist for AutoNation, and now with your own organization. What would you say to these innovators going forward? What matters? What's important? What should they be mastering?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. And I'm going to make it tangential. I'm going to go back to some of the comments that Chase just made also about our dealer innovation. I think this is somewhat related. It's interesting that I think we're at a really interesting inflection point where I believe our dealers have evolved to a point where they understand the technology enough that they're better today at directing what is needed than the innovation that's been historically coming in to them. So rather than waiting back and watching NADA and seeing what new innovation is it interesting, our dealers now have a very clear understanding of what is going to unlock value and what they need to be able to drive their success into the future. And they're being very vocal about it. And so back to Chase's point, having them in this mix, I think is really, really critical. They have a super important voice. I think from innovators that are building technology today, it's really important that they're building to scale, thinking about enterprise grade solutions. What's my architecture behind it, and all of the other things around, just rather than just what is the widget that I'm building, what all is the infrastructure that's going to take to actually support it and deliver it and scale it. It's not an easy answer for it, David, but it's one thing to come up with an idea. It's another thing to build it to where it can actually be enterprise grade and scale it and be profitable. It's very difficult. That's why it's hard to build these businesses.
It is. I wanted to bounce something off of you, Jeff, with respect to what Ron just shared, just from your perspective through your lens of the Pohanka Auto Group. A couple things. Number one, obviously you have this growing tech stack where your managers are now needing to log into an ever increasing number of platforms seemingly per day, which seems to dilute productivity to a point, and certainly makes it a challenge to have the level of utilization one would hope in each individual platform. Second thing is, the tech stack becoming untenable at this point? And the third really quick question is, when you look at these solutions, what's paramount to you?
Well, the answer to that question is, we're in a very competitive environment, so we're looking for an edge, and we don't know what we don't know. So, if you're in an affluent position, you can afford to experiment to try to search for an edge. Of course, you always can learn from everything you do. Even the mistakes you make, you learn from it. And it is complicated. So we need to provide the best possible services to our staff to make the most of the time they spend here in the dealership. So we're always looking for a better thing. But it's like, the old adage, half your advertising is complete waste. You just know which half. So you've got to experiment a little bit and see what the results are. We're always looking for a competitive edge. Of course, the thing I see is that sometimes the things that work, we stop doing. We're keeping looking for something new all the time. And that's not always the right thing. Sometimes what we have now is working. We just stop doing it. So I had a manager's meeting today. I said, sometimes there's a few things, if you do a few things well, identify what they are and do the hell out of them. I don't play much golf, but I remember I said, how many things can you remember in your head? Like 50 things you got to do. Well, I'd break something and I would shank the ball. So last time I played was the best game of my life. This is 3 things I remember. I won't tell you what they were, but it was the best game of my life. That's my last game, but just let's do a few things well, identify what those things are and do the hell out of them. It's probably a better strategy. But the upper end, your IT people, let's look for a better widget if we can give them some kind of competitive advantage over our competition. That's how I look at the 2 things.
That's great. Absolutely great. Hey, Chase, as you head into NADA, and you're probably looking forward to it, all of you, as much as I am. It's a chance to reconnect with, some great associates out there, have more meetings and more productive meetings we can in 2.5 days, 3 days than we can in months. But as you head into Vegas in the next week or 2, what are you looking forward to the most? And do you expect any big announcements or any surprises to take place during the event?
Yeah, one, I love NADA. To your point, it's you see the buddies and you've seen them for 20 years, and it's good to get back with them, and it's just a big reunion. So I'm so excited about going.
I am.
I think you think about the NADA floor. I think we go through cycles. You think about the technology innovation cycle. So it was lead management, CRM, SEO, SEM, and those were kind of like golden eras where I felt like the entrepreneurs were good and they were coalesced on a vision. And then you have these doldrums where there's kind of a lot of look-alike kind of tech out there. And so I feel like we're moving into maybe another, this is maybe a strange way to think about it, but it's kind of a golden age for us. I really think AI is going to end up being really, really one of those fundamental, it's going to be as big as CRM and likely bigger than CRM when we went through that cycle. I will tell you, it's not great right now. I think there's a handful of AI companies out there that are pretty good, but we're excited about what could happen. There's a lot of fast followers in our space. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of technologists out there that say, "Hey, I can do that," and if you actually peel the onion back, there's not a lot there. We call it vaporware, right? And yeah. Unfortunately, there's a fair share of vaporware on the NADA floor, but AI is going to be real. And are we going to see something big this cycle? Oh, there's going to be 2 or 3 companies that make announcements. Are they real? I don't know. Is it more marketing? Probably. But over the next couple of years, you're going to see some really, really cool tech out there that's AI-based.
Hey, do you feel that most of that, by the way, is going to come in the way of workflow? The workflow aspect of things rather than, I don't see AI as a technology that's going to actually replace humans or going to allow me to reduce my staff by necessarily 15, 20%, but rather make them far better, far more effective, efficient, productive. Do you see it the same way? And do you think AI at this point already, we're running the risk of it being, almost used ad nauseum? Seems like everybody says, oh, by the way, we're an AI product.
Yeah, and it goes back to my vaporware comment. There's just very little real AI out there. So you're absolutely right. There's no, and your question was, I'm sorry.
Well, do you think that one of the real powers of AI is on the workflow side?
Yeah, one of our rules, and this is, it's really served us well, is when we look at a product to invest in, is it a product that changes dealer process? We have not done well at that. because we find that dealers have got, just like Jeff was saying, we do things well. Let's keep doing those things well. And so sometimes inserting tech into significant changes in process is tough, but we believe kind of the last bastion of an area of a dealership that needs innovation is workflow. And so can you create workflow that doesn't absolutely disrupt process? And I know those two are diametrically opposed, but if you can make that happen and not absolutely freak out the dealer or the service writer or the salesperson or whoever you're disrupting, that's going to be a good play. So I would agree with you. Workflow is a good spot.
Great. Thank you. Hey, Ron, I'm curious. I always tout you as the leading strategist out there for our industry. And a lot of people may not know, obviously chances are they don't know what you do behind the scenes, but I do know that you have a very dramatic and positive impact on the industry based on what you do. I'm curious from your perspective as a strategist and as somewhat a futurist as well. What do you think of this fairly recent announcement between Amazon and Hyundai? Is it more hype than reality? Do you think it's going to lead to other manufacturers doing the same thing? Is it cracking open Pandora's box between retail automotive and Amazon that will lead us down a bad path? What's your take?
Yeah. Well, first, David, thank you for your kind words. Look, I don't think we know yet. I just don't think we know yet, and we certainly shouldn't be surprised that that Amazon is doing this. They've been trying to figure out, how to enter this space for a long time. I'll give Hyundai credit for being innovative and wanting to experiment with this type of a marketplace. But I think we shouldn't underestimate it. I think we've got to pay a lot of attention to what it could mean. And look, I think some things are going to probably not work as well as they thought, and they'll adjust. And some things may actually work better than anticipated. And I think we should be eyes wide open and not be scared of this, David. I think part of these things are, how do we lean into these opportunities and then take advantage of it? I think trying to keep things as they've always been, just out of fear of the unknown, I think is going to be the wrong approach. I really think that, and if it's not exactly this, others are going to be trying other approaches. I'd be really curious and watch it and be optimistic of what it could mean for our stores. I could give a real contrarian point of view, but I don't think that's a helpful approach.
Yeah, I could certainly accept that. I think the big takeaway from your comment, and Jeff, I'd be interested in you weighing in here, is that, when things tend to evolve, a lot of people's immediate reaction seems to be to put their hands up. I just want to stay right where I am. But at the end of the day, those who seem to continue to dominate and to do well and create sustainably successful companies always recognize the need to innovate. I got to figure this out. I need to figure out this new playing field, this new opportunity, such as EVs, such as Amazon. And I'm either going to be all in, or it seems like at some point I'm going to be all out. Jeff, is that a fair assessment?
Look, when this came out, Hyundai told their dealer council an hour before they made the public announcement. So they really got no feedback from dealers. The headlines were all wrong. It said Hyundai's going to sell direct to consumers, which is not the Amazon program. It's only available to Amazon employees, and it's through 18 dealers. So, we had, to their credit, Hyundai, with their 100 trade, a lot of our national trade associations and dealer leadership at NADA had a question and answer period with Hyundai leadership. And a couple of things are not included in this. One is, how do you trade your car in? And with finance, it's very limited. You only through Hyundai Motor Finance, which we know not everybody fits every OEM's formula for being able to finance a customer. So there's a lot of limitations to the program. It clearly rang the bell and got a lot of a focus of attention. I don't think it's going to go real far. We got to keep an eye on it, as it was said, but I don't think it's everything people feared it would be.
Yeah, it seems to me that in almost every case, whether it's autonomous or whether it's EVs or whether it's something like this, that they seem to get far more airplay, conjecture and hypothecating and hyperbole. And I mean, all this, so much conversation. And it seems like it's like, back in the day when we were young and New Year's Eve was just going to be epic. And then it turned out to be just kind of a, not that big of a deal. It seems to me like, I like what you said, Ron, because I don't think that we would be wise to underestimate any time Amazon's got their toes into anything, their fingers in anything. They're serious about domination. I always tell people to put in www.relentless.com, hit enter, and watch what comes up, Amazon. So, that smiley face is not a smiley face. It's a line between A and Z. We will dominate every industry between A and Z. So I'm sure somewhere, somehow, they've got, they would love to be able to penetrate this industry at a greater level. But, as dealers, we've been down this road before, and let's see how it plays out. Chase.
It's in the age of broad announcements to attract attention and get the headlines. It's to stimulate the stock value or whatever. And there was one, I think it was Mercedes or maybe it was BMW last year, the Munich show. Here's our concept Tesla killer. Well, it's a concept which never comes out as the concept. I mean,
our clay model that's going to change the world.
Yeah. There's so much of that going on now. People seeking headlines, and you get them all the time. But this one certainly resonated. I think it's more of an incremental change than a fundamental change to our business.
Jeff, and I think that's where you pay attention. Is look, our industry is underestimated over and over and over again about the complication, in the complexity it takes to deliver a consumer a car, and it's why our wonderful franchise dealers exist. But we've also gone through these phases of, how's the internet going to impact this, and how's price transparency going to impact the business, and how, we've gone through the list of all these things that we've kind of blown off, and over time there's truth to it. So there are nuggets in here that will probably take and create signals to other opportunities for us as a retailer, so where we should pay attention to it. That's why I'm saying I'm not fearful of this. I don't think this is going to, I think to your points, I don't think it's going to be some dramatic, pivot point that, puts dealers at risk. But I really do believe there's opportunities here that we should pay attention. And I think the real innovators and the people that lean in will find those.
And you brought up autonomy as an example. The media blew that so out of proportion. And even from an investing standpoint, there were a lot of guys in the Valley that got on that train. What they didn't realize, it's the last 5%. It's really, really hard. The 95% is pretty easy. The last 5% is really hard. In saying all that, to Ron's point, autonomy is going to happen. And it's going to happen in a really, really big way. It's going to happen very quietly without all the media fanfare. And we're going to look up and go, whoa, 20% of our vehicles are autonomous. That's interesting. And it's not going to be with the CNN headlines.
But their buzz in our business. Rideshare was going to transform our business. People don't want to. This is what's so funny. You only use your car 5% of the time, so you'll share it with others. Do you share your house with others? Not all the time. That was.
I'm open-minded, Jeff.
Someone said, "I don't share my car. My stuff's in my car. I'm not sharing my car." So, and then the autonomous cars. Look, Tang came from the space program, right? People old enough, no Tang. There are things that come off from this, but you have the GM Cruise, which has lost their license in California.
Right.
And I was reading that every 3 to 5 miles, a human has to intervene in that vehicle. That's not autonomous. I mean, and so there are things that will throw off from these, but will the end result ever happen? It's so complicated. I don't know, but it's that these are buzzes that we're going to change. Everyone's going to change our business, but it's amazingly, pretty solid. It's more of evolutionary than revolutionary, it seems.
The power
and Jeff,
of
that was
marketing
my point about, like, I don't think you should be scared of this. Like, this isn't like the panic moment, and that was really my point. And look, I would love to put a timeline together of all the predictions of our dealers, that this is going to be the end of auto retail. Like, I've been at it over 35 years, and
I have that, Ron. I'll share.
I want to see it, David. And this is yet another one. This is not going to be the end of auto
going
retail.
back to the 80s. And they've been wrong 100% of the time.
And yet, David, every one of these things that are going to be the end of auto retail became opportunities for retailers to take advantage of to advance. And I guess that's my point is, I think the smart retailers that lean in, rather than being fearful of it, say, look, what can I learn and what can I take advantage of, to advance our business?
Yeah, as you guys said, it's interesting. You just nailed it. All of these things that are supposed to spell doom, from the Ford Direct network, going all the way back there, and everything forward. E-commerce was going to destroy us. Internet was going to destroy us. Uber was going to be the end of automotive retail. In San Francisco, we sold more vehicles post-Uber than pre-Uber. Go figure that out. So
the thing is, dealers are like bamboo. It's hard to get rid of us.
So to your point, Ron, I think they look at it, they go, and then they say, well, what can I take away from this? What should I pull away? And they evolve. Chase, I'm curious, from your perspective, you have a unique perspective in that you guys are on the retail side of the business, right? You're still on the retail side in San Antonio, and you're on the tech side and innovation side and on the investment side. So through your lens, from your perspective, what do you think are likely to be the biggest stories or have some significant impact over the next 3 to 5 years? Jeff mentioned, and you mentioned, hey, autonomous, they were not right, but they were not wrong. It's coming. What else are we likely to see as we go forward the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, in my 25 years in the industry, the way the OEMs have handled EV has been just baffling for me. They're normally very pragmatic, and there's a lot of pattern recognition with those guys. It just seemed like, hey, let's get in the EV business. And so I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity, but a ton of shakeout over the next three to 5 years around EV. We like that as investors because we think there's some really interesting tangential places to invest around EV. I don't know that I'm getting in the EV manufacturing investing business. I'm not going to compete against Tesla. But are there ways to make money in that space? Because we've put the money in the ground. The OEMs have made their bet, and we're going to have to see this through, whatever this is. I look at it and say, okay, whoa, huge disruption. Where are the ways around that we can make some money? And just quick ideas. I think at some point, battery recycling is going to be a really interesting place. Second life batteries. You talked to Nissan about what's going on with the Leaf, and these are their numbers, not mine. But the EV battery lasts plus or minus 20 years. Mm-hmm. Well, if the vehicle is going to last 12 years, what are you doing with that battery for those other 8 years? Because it still can hold electricity. Yeah. And so we're really interested in applications, whether it's wind farms or solar farms, ways to do something with batteries. At a dealer level, we think that dealers are going to get really, really good at selling an F&I package where you're actually selling the at-home charger for the vehicles. And we think it's going to be a nice little profitable item in F&I. So those are just 3 random ideas that aren't truly, I'm going to manufacture EV vehicles, but ways that we think we might be able to make some money around the ecosystem.
So is it fair to summarize or characterize what you're saying, Chase, is saying in the short term, there certainly are some pitfalls, some challenges, potential exposure to net profit issues, but in the long term, there's a lot of likely opportunities for those who have a willingness to, again, reinvent, go all in, and figure it out.
Yeah, it's kind of been a theme of this call, right? Like short-term thinking versus long-term reality.
Yeah.
We've all said that in different ways.
Ron, from your perspective, just similar to Chase, EVs in 2024 likely to be a positive or a negative on retail automotive?
Well, it's such a tough question, David, and I'm not the best person to predict here. But look, I think Jeff said it earlier. We're starting to see EV day supply stacking up on our dealers' lots. We're seeing pricing discounted. I think supply and demand is speaking, and you're starting to hear the rhetoric, change, where there's a lot more conversation today about why this may not have been such a great idea and why the pace may not be moving as fast as earlier predicted, back to the theme of our conversation. And it seems to me that 24 is probably going to be a year of reckoning of what is realistic about consumer demand and what our dealers are going to do about it. This could be problematic with a lot of brands that they stack up and they're not selling at the same pace or without the discounting.
Let me pivot to something that, and I completely understand where you're coming from. Not an easy question. Certainly nothing any of us can peg with all certainty. What about from the innovation side? Those technology creators, those vendors out there, in terms of the landscape with strategic partnerships, acquisitions, from your side of the business, you're dealing with all of these organizations that are creating new solutions. Is this likely, from your perspective, to be a busier than normal year, busier than last year type of a year? What do you see?
Are you still relating to EV, David, or did
No. I'm just curious. I want to pivot and go right to your wheelhouse in terms of the companies that you work with. I mean, think about the transactions that you were part of, for the last few years, and you see these ebbs and flows that seem to cycle consistent with the broader market. Do you see this as being a busier year on that front than last year?
I think you're going to see a lot of transactions, especially in the first half of 24. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that hit the pause button, that have been thinking about maybe transacting and paused, that are going to be coming out in 24. I think it's going to be a busy M&A year for us.
Okay. And Jeff, I want to leave you with the last word. 2 questions. Question number 1, is this the first of possibly many years going forward where, to your point, those that lean in, those that are committed to reinventing are going to start separating from maybe those that don't on the dealership front? And when it comes to EVs, do you see it having, in the short term this year, a positive or negative impact for retailers?
Well, I think we have to constantly innovate and look for those competitive edges. I think that it's important to be ahead of the curve than behind it, I believe. Look, buzzes are good for the car business, a reason to shop for a car. So autonomous cars, all EVs, these are all buzzes. Mm-hmm. I think one thing to think about, which people don't with EVs, is that when you buy a phone or buy a laptop or PC, your hardware is pretty much fixed unless you take it in and have something added to it. Same with an ICE car. But as cars become driving computers, you can, through downloads, they can enhance their performance, their drivability, their pleasability. It's like you can add apps to your phone, and you're getting software updates on your phone and your laptop all the time that improve their performance. This could really change the buying cycle somewhat, because my car stays new, it stays fresher. I own two EVs. They both get updates, one more than the other. Once, since I bought it in May, it's had like 7 updates, big updates. So this could really change the buy. As long as I'm pleased with the operation of the car, this could lengthen the ownership cycle potentially and have an impact. It also affords manufacturers an opportunity to sell software to consumers, in which one of my cars, actually both, you subscribe to certain services, which is a new profit center for manufacturers who are very anxious to get into. And so I think there are opportunities with EVs. I think we're seeing things in terms of less maintenance, but there are other issues too: higher collision damage expense, maybe higher insurance costs coming later.
Tires.
And
they burn through tires like nobody's business.
They cost more at the get-go, and people, 60% live paycheck to paycheck. They can't. I'll have savings 4 or 5 years later. At the end of that doesn't pay today's bills. So there are lots of issues. The big kahuna in all this is China. You see, Chinese domestic manufacturers they have a real cost advantage over everyone else.
Yes.
Because they control the minerals, the processed minerals, and the Chinese government's intertwined in those companies. They probably have at least a $12,000 cost advantage over every other manufacturer that's not directly in China or related with the Chinese government. And that is being open. These government regulations will be an opening for Chinese cars to enter the European market and eventually the United States market, whether through direct imports or building plants in Mexico. And the Chinese wave is the big thing that's coming. Now there are waves, Europeans, Japanese, Korean waves, and there were benefits to dealers. Well, Chinese wave, EV wave, which is basically the opening, is made by the government and their regulations. The Chinese could not compete with ICE cars. They can with EVs because they control the minerals and have the foresight to do that in the process of minerals. Will they come in and cause consolidation in the car business? Manufacturers that can't invest, can't keep up, or maybe bankrupt some manufacturers. It's very possible if this giant Chinese wave comes, aided and abetted by government regulations. I think that's the big thing that people are starting to see on the horizon. Now, it'll be an opportunity for some dealers to take on these brands, as they are in Australia and other markets. So for some, it'll be negative, and some it could be very much positive.
I think there's a certain brilliance in them being committed to a dealer model, franchise model, rather than direct to consumer on many fronts. It certainly is going to, I think, cause many dealers, if you were direct to consumer, you're a Chinese manufacturer, direct to consumer, okay, people are going to have a lot of problems with that. But in a dealer model, I think it softens that. The fact that you're manufacturing in Mexico, which is going to allow you to, for lack of a better term, circumvent the issues with the amount of minerals that are in batteries. You qualify for the 7,500. It's going to be very interesting. But I think that you all also brought up something really critical. I think our ability, without question, what I hear you all saying, our ability to remain open-minded, not overreact, don't underestimate, but don't overreact, and have the willingness to pay attention, to learn lessons, as the latest and greatest threat to retail automotive gets bandied about. The reality is that if you learn from it, take action on it, and are committed to innovating, we're going to do just fine. Is that fair?
Where else can you get a job? Where else can you get a job like this? There's always some new horizon every day.
It's the best. I keep saying, what other industry has created so many millionaires and billionaires? And what other industry can you go into without a college education, or sometimes even a high school education, and you end up down the road becoming a retail automotive dealer in what I consider the greatest industry on the planet?
That it is.
So I think we're all very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be joined by all of you. I really, really very much appreciate your time, your perspective, and your insights, and wishing you all the best for an outstanding 2024, and look forward to seeing all of you at NADA in the not so distant future. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.